Very, very good morning to you and God's blessings to you and yours. Welcome to another session of Ask the Pastor Bible Study Live. My name is Steve Magua, and this morning, because it is morning where I am going to be dealing with this verse in Matthew chapter number 10 and verse 28. Matthew 10:28. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So that is the passage that we are going to be looking at. And I'm going to ask, as always, as you're coming in, a couple things, housekeeping. This is Ask the Pastor. It is an online teaching ministry of the church at the Well. I am the pastor of the local church here. I am the teacher. And this online ministry, of course, has two channels. We have the YouTube channel and we have the Facebook channel. If you attend these teachings and you find them valuable, you find them edifying for yourself as a Christian, we are asking that you would help us to spread the word, that you would not only subscribe and follow appropriately, depending on how they make it possible to do that, either on YouTube or Facebook. Hit the notification bell. Make sure you are always able to get us when we start the discussion. And please tag somebody right now. Tag somebody. Invite somebody to come and be a part of the discussion. David Morethi, I know you are there. You know many of the names of the people who desire to be in this broadcast. So can you do me the favor, be my secretary, and go ahead and spread the word. That way I can start the discussion immediately. So, the question this morning that I want to handle is this. Does the Bible teach that the fate of the wicked is an eternal conscious torment in a fire that never ends and in a life that never ends forever and ever, infinitely? Or does the Bible teach annihilation? In other words, accountability and punishment, judgment in a particular way, that the person comes to a state of death where they are no longer alive, they are no longer conscious. That's called annihilation. So eternal conscious torment versus annihilation. There is a third option. I just don't consider it valid enough, therefore I don't discuss it, and that is the option called purgatorial universalism. Purgatorial universalism is the doctrine that is taught by some Christians and that was taught even in the early church. So in other words, in the early church, the first 2 centuries of the church, or the first 3 centuries of the church, these 3 views were held by the early church fathers, different ones holding different positions. So the first position being eternal conscious torment, where people are just suffering infinitely. The second position being annihilation, where the wicked are judged, held accountable for their sin, destroyed, and they cease to exist. Or purgatorial universalism, where the wicked go through a judgment, a punishment of purification, and then they are brought back into the presence of God, and therefore nobody dies eternally, or nobody suffers eternally. They only suffer for a particular period of time, and then they are brought into the presence of God. So those are the 3 positions. But for today, I'm only going to be addressing the 2: eternal conscious torment or annihilation. Let me say right off the bat, I grew up believing in eternal conscious torment. In fact, I believed in eternal conscious torment throughout the first 10 years of my ministry. So all the way up to right around 2020, I had become a minister in 2008. So actually it's 12 years. I believed and I taught eternal conscious torment. However, after further study, I have come to be convinced that annihilation is the appropriate and consistent teaching of the scriptures. So, but of course, I do have to prove my case using the scriptures, but I don't want to present a case that I did not declare to begin with. Okay, so now let's go to the verse. Let's go to the verse. In Matthew 10:28, Jesus says, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." So this is what we want to examine. What does Jesus mean when he says, "Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell"? So what is Jesus talking about? Well, number one, whenever you come to any passage in the New Testament that you want to expound, that you want to find out what does it mean, you must establish the baseline. You must establish the baseline upon which you are going to interpret that passage. If you don't have a hermeneutical foundation, then anything goes. So what is the hermeneutical foundation of interpreting the Bible, for interpreting passages in the New Testament? Well, the first foundation is Jesus. Jesus is the answer to every question. So whatever Jesus says it is, that's what it is, because Jesus is God. Jesus is the one to whom all judgment, to whom the whole covenant was committed to, and therefore Jesus is the final answer. Secondly, the apostles of Jesus were whom Jesus committed the message to. So Jesus himself did not write anything. He committed the writing of his teachings to his 12 apostles and their associated disciples that were with them. So therefore, whatever Paul teaches, whatever Peter teaches, whatever Jude teaches, whatever John teaches, we take that to be the final word because they were the direct disciples of Christ. Now, having said that, we must now ask ourselves, what is the principle that Jesus and his apostles used in order to determine the meaning of things? And here it is. The disciples and Jesus declared that Jesus was coming to fulfill the law and the prophets. So Jesus did not come and introduce anything new. Christianity, true Christianity, is not something new and different from the Old Testament. Rather, true Christianity, the Christianity of Jesus and the apostles, is the fulfillment of every promise and of every decree of the Old Testament. So Christianity is not something for, Americans or Africans or Europeans, and then the Old Testament is something for Israelites. No. Anything that you will learn in the New Testament is established in the Old Testament. The New Testament is just how Jesus comes to fulfill the promises of God in the Old Testament. Therefore, when we look at this passage where Jesus says, "Do not fear him," or "do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell," the first question you have to answer is, where is Jesus deriving that from? Where is Jesus deriving that from in the Old Testament? Because this is an issue of the fulfillment of the Old Testament. Killing the body, destroying the body in both soul and body in hell is something that was taught in the Old Testament. Why? Because, number one, notice here the word hell. We will start with hell, and then we will backward to what does it mean to destroy both body and soul and body. So what is hell? you will notice immediately on my Bible and in your Bible too that there is a footnote. The footnotes are the little notes that they put at the end of a word anytime you're doing Bible study. So you will notice here, for instance, they have an H under this word. Now, if I click on this H, which will tell us what the footnote is, it tells us that the word hell there is the Greek word Gehenna. It is the Greek word Gehenna. So, even before we jump forward, you must come to the place where you realize that the word hell does not exist in the Bible. There is no such word as hell in the Bible. The word hell was added into the Bible in the 4th century and going forward. So in the time of Jesus, Jesus never said go to hell, or you're going to go to hell, or you're going to suffer in hell. Peter never talked about hell. Paul never talked about hell. They have no idea of that word. So in other words, if they were to rise up today and you went to them and said, tell us about hell, they would say, about what? I have never heard of such a word. Hell? Because the word they know is Gehenna. The word they know is Gehenna. Jesus, in every time that he talks about what is translated in your Bible as hell, he's talking about Gehenna. And Gehenna is not hell. Gehenna is not hell. Gehenna is Gehenna. Let's look at it a little bit closer. So I'm going to go back here to verse number 28. And I'm going to break down what Gehenna is so that we can find out what Jesus is talking about. What is this place where people are destroyed, or souls and bodies are destroyed in one event? Matthew 10:28. We are going to go into a text analysis here real quick. In this channel, we do deep dive Bible study. We don't do superficial Bible study. Matthew 10:28. And not you should be afraid of those killing the body. However, the soul not being able to kill. You should fear, however, rather the one being able, both soul and body, to destroy. Apolesai, we'll come back to that. In hell. The word is Gehenna. Now, it's the word 1067. So we are going to go directly. Ooh, I don't know why that happened. The word Gehenna, right there. Gehenna. Now today, from the 4th century, they added the definition of hell. But the original definition is Gehenna only. Hell comes in the 4th century. Please know and understand that. So what is Gehenna? Gehenna is a transliteration of the Hebrew term Gehinnom. The valley of Hinnom. That is the definition of the 1st century. That is the definition of Jesus and the apostles. Anything else you see, even on my page here in the Bible study notes, is the addition of theologians starting from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century. But we do not want to define things in the Bible according to what people defined them later as. We define things in the Bible according to how Jesus and the apostles defined them as. In other words, when Jesus is talking to the crowd in Matthew 10, which is the 12 apostles, and he tells them, fear the one who can kill, who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna, they would only have understood one thing. They would have understood Gehenna. So what is Gehenna, and why are bodies being destroyed in Gehenna? Well, let's look a little bit further at what Gehenna means. Now here in the concordance, it tells you Gehenna is a valley west and south of Jerusalem. It is also a symbolic name for the final place of the punishment of the ungodly. So in the Old Testament, Gehenna was a valley, a place. It was a proper noun. A valley west and south of Jerusalem, right outside the wall of Jerusalem. It also symbolized the place of final punishment for the ungodly. So, when Jesus mentions Gehenna, he mentions Gehenna the very first time in Matthew chapter 5. That's the first time Jesus speaks about Gehenna, the word that is now translated as hell in modern Bibles. But when he mentions Gehenna the very first time, he mentions it in this context. So go with me to Matthew 5. So in Matthew 5, Jesus says these words. Matthew chapter 5, verse number 17. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. This is very critical. So Jesus says, I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to fulfill them. Therefore, when Jesus says here in Matthew 10:28 that do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna, he is expecting his audience to immediately refer to the law and the prophets and find out how were the wicked to be destroyed, both soul and body, at Gehenna. In fact, what you will notice here in Matthew chapter 5, as I'm about to show you, the people that Jesus spoke to never asked him, what is Gehenna? What is Gehenna? We have never heard of this before. Because you see, if Jesus is introducing a brand new concept, his disciples and his listeners would always ask him, tell us, what does that mean? What is the meaning of this? So watch this. In Matthew 5, he says, do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to fulfill them. Truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a jot will pass from the law. And I want you to see this, because he's talking about the law and the prophets. So not an iota, not a jot will pass away from the law and the prophets. So the word law from henceforth now, summarizes the law and the prophets, until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Verse number 21. This is the first mention of Gehenna in the New Testament. In fact, in the whole, in the New Testament, let's say that, because there are mentions in the Old Testament, as you shall see. So you have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. Again, notice there is a footnote. There is a footnote right here where the word hell is. Why? Because the translators in English know they are not translating the word that is in the original. Because the word that is in the original, as you can see, hopefully this is big enough. Let me try and make it as big as possible. I think that's as big as I can make it. Look, if you look at this, I don't know if you guys can see that. It says Greek Gehenna, also in verse 29 and verse number 30. So this is the very, very first time that Jesus mentions this word. So he says in verse 20 about the anger here, the hell of fire. Now the word is Gehenna. So Jesus says those who are angry will be thrown in Gehenna. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, that is your animal offering, and there you remember what your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Last, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with a lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than the whole body to be thrown into hell. The word is Gehenna. Right there again. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to go into hell. What in hell is Jesus talking about? Notice throughout the New Testament, nobody asks Jesus to explain hell. Nobody asks Jesus to expound on it, which means they already know about it. How would they already know about it? This is how they would know about it. Because Jesus has come to fulfill the law and the prophets. And the prophets, particularly Jeremiah and Isaiah, had already prophesied that in the final day, the judgment would take place at Gehenna. So when Jesus tells them that they will be cast into Gehenna, that they will be destroyed at Gehenna, that is already their theology. That is already their eschatology at this point. So let's go directly into Jeremiah chapter 7. Let's find out what Jeremiah said would happen in the day of judgment. So Jeremiah chapter 7, we are going to pick it up where he speaks about Gehenna. Now remember, Gehenna is a transliteration of the Hebrew word Gehinnom. That is the valley of Hinnom. So when we come over here in verse number 30 of Jeremiah 7, the Bible says, "For the sons of Judah have done evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They have set their detestable things in the house that is called by my name to defile it. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom." Now, let me pause here just to make sure that we are together. The valley of the son of Hinnom, you can see it right there. You can see it right there where I highlighted it. It's a proper noun. Capital V, capital S, capital H. Why? Because in the rules of grammar, whenever you are including the name of a place in writing, in any language, you always capitalize the first letter of that name because it is a proper name. For instance, if I want to send you to New York, or if I want you to meet me in New York, and I say, let's meet in New York, I will capitalize the N and the Y in New York because it's a proper name. It's not a verb, it's not an adjective, it's not a pronoun, it is a noun. And here is another rule of grammar. You never change the name of a place and replace it with another word. Even though you might describe that city with other words, for instance, you might call a city Sin City, or you might call a city Murder City. You may call it whatever you want to call it, but when you are describing it to people, when you are telling people where the place is, you always use the proper name. You always use the proper name. Unless the people already are familiar with the name and its nickname. So that, for instance, if I say Chi Town or Chai Town or whatever the case may be, those who know that town, they know what it is. So anyway, the valley of the son of Hinnom is what comes to be known in the Greek as Gehenna. Gehenna is a real place that existed right outside Jerusalem. So let's see what Jeremiah is going to say about it. So, by the way, if anybody has a question, I try to explain things expansively so that it can be understood. So they have built the high places, that is altars. High places are always altars of sacrifice. They have built the altars of sacrifices of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no more be called Tophet, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury in Topheth, because there is no room elsewhere. And the dead bodies of these people will be food for the birds of the air. So this is the final judgment according to Jeremiah. The dead bodies of these people will be food for the birds of the air and for the beasts of the earth. and none will frighten them away. And I will silence in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. Now I gotta ask you a question. As I was reading that passage, were there things that jumped out to you from the New Testament? As Jeremiah is describing how the final judgment would look like, did something or anything jump out to you, even if you are unfamiliar the source of the New Testament? Did something you're like, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that before? One of the things that should have jumped out to you immediately is this here. Let me use this one. Number one, what should jump out to you immediately as I was reading that passage is Revelation 19. The Great Supper of God. In the Great Supper of God, John is told, starting from verse number 17. Revelation 19. The final judgment. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun. With a loud voice, he called to the birds that fly directly overhead, come, gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, both great and small. And I saw the beasts and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who is in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast, those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. The rest were slain by the sword that came from the mouth of him who was sitting on the horse, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. That should have jumped out to you immediately. I read Jeremiah 7, because Jeremiah said that in the final judgment, and the dead bodies of these people will be food for the birds of the air, for the beasts of the earth. Both these, birds of the air and beasts of the earth, are in Revelation 19. I hope you saw that. And none will frighten them away. And I will silence in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. So before I even go much further, hopefully if you are a student of scripture, you should realize, oh my goodness, so Revelation 19 is speaking about Jerusalem. Revelation 19 is speaking about Jerusalem. Revelation 19 is speaking about Judah. The judgment that was to take place in Judah and Jerusalem, where the birds of the air are called by an angel to come and eat the flesh of kings and generals. The kings and generals and slaves and free are the bodies of Israelites in Revelation 19. Revelation 19 is derived from Jeremiah 7. Now, if you already don't know that, don't knock your head in the head. Don't knock yourself in the head. Don't condemn yourself. Because as Christians, we are never taught to establish the foundation of New Testament passages. We are taught to take it literally just as it is, and then to extrapolate it with our imagination. So that when we see the lake of fire, we don't even start to say, wait a minute, where is John getting that from? So that I can understand what it is. Because the moment you don't know what the source is, the moment you don't know where John is getting it from, then all you are left with is with your imagination, your fantasies. And what you come up with is totally divorced from what the Bible is talking about. Because Jesus came to fulfill the law and the prophets, nothing more. So the lake of fire is a fulfillment of a passage in the Old Testament of the law and the prophets. Gehenna is a fulfillment of Jeremiah 7. And in Jeremiah 7, do you see people squirming, screaming, burning forever? Is that what you see in Jeremiah 7? When you read what God is going to do in the judgment, let's read it again, because this is the details of the judgment. Jesus doesn't give you the details of the judgment because he expects you to know your Old Testament well